It's 5 a.m. here in Houston, where I am. Tropical storm Harvey making landfall again, this time in Louisiana, where it is hammering the air rain. I am happy to report this morning the conditions do seem to be improving. The streets that we drove in to get to Houston, they were wet, but they were not flooded. Now, the situation here in the convention center, though, is pretty dire. I am at the city's largest shelter, where at last count, I just checked 5 minutes ago, 8,319 people are seeking refuge. There are 2 more mega shelters that are now open in this city. They're taking people in to alleviate the overcapacity conditions here. 1/3 of Harris County, which includes 4.5 million people in Houston and its suburbs, is now underwater. And all eyes are on the 2 dams that are trying to contain this record-breaking rainfall in this area. The death toll, we want to give you an update on that. It is, of course, sadly on the rise. Among those people killed, a veteran Houston police sergeant, Steve Perez. He drowned trying to get to his command post to help those in need. And rescue crews and volunteers are, of course, working around the clock. As you've heard, they have saved thousands and thousands of people from the floodwaters. I mean, here are just a few examples on your screen. There are thousands of these examples, Chris. So we have all sorts of survivor stories to bring you this morning, as well as updates on how Houston is going to try to deal with this today.
You have so many people down there in this concerned citizens corps going around saving their fellow community members. It'll be very helpful to people to see what the reality is down there. The big question is, what will this rain mean as Harvey returns? Okay, hopefully Texas will be spared any further damage, except for this one part of East Texas that we'll be watching this morning. But what about Louisiana? There's already about 2 feet of rain in just the last 24 hours. So there is a flood threat to several states in its path. All of this as President Trump is back in Washington after meeting with emergency responders in Texas. The president is getting some criticism for how he was on the ground, and was his focus on himself or the people who are suffering. We'll take you through the politics of it. But he also has a new agenda item for you to entertain this morning: tax reform. The president says he's going to go ahead and make his pitch to the country as we are watching this natural disaster unfold. So we're covering everything for you. Let's begin with CNN's Polo Sandoval in one of the areas that we're watching right now in Texas. What do we know, Polo? What is the status where you are?
Chris, the Brazos River continues to rise. A short drive just outside of Houston, west of the city center. Meanwhile, there in Houston, that curfew has been lifted as the remnants of Harvey, at least Tropical Storm Harvey, makes that second landfall near the Texas-Louisiana border. There are many people here right now still coming to grips with what's happening here as those search and rescue operations continue. Obviously, that death toll continues on the rise in and around the Houston area, and that includes Sergeant Steve Perez, that veteran of the Houston Police Department. This morning, we're learning that his wife begged him not to go to work this past weekend as the storm was closing in on the region. We are also learning that he eventually did go missing under an overpass. Officials recovering the sergeant's body just yesterday. He is somebody who is described as having a passion for giving back to his community, and sadly, that Sunday morning, it would be the last day that he would do that. The reality is that death toll will likely increase, particularly as officials try to find answers for the Saldivar family back in Houston. CNN speaking to a loved one of the family of 6 that is still missing at this hour. They say there is very little hope that they'll find their loved ones alive.
The current just lifted up the van and started pointing it towards, into the water. It just took the van, and he had his window down, so he managed to get out the window, and then he tried to get around the van, but he couldn't. It was too strong. The current was too strong.
He can hear the kids screaming and crying, trying to get out of the van, and he kept telling them, go to the back of the van and, open the back doors, but from what he's describing, I'm sure the kids couldn't even grab a grip onto the van just to even reach the back door, much less open it. And he said it just went under the water.
And in order to try to prevent another tragedy like that, officials here in Fort Bend County have implemented a mandatory evacuation, Allison, including this riverside community along the Brazos. This water level you see behind me, Allison, is expected to go up at least another 5 feet in the next few days.
Okay, Polo, thank you for keeping track of that. Really scary stuff. We'll check back with you. So Harvey, as we say, is making landfall again, this time as a tropical storm. The storm dumping very heavy rain in eastern Texas and the western parishes of Louisiana. That's where we find CNN's Kaylee Hartung. She's in Lake Charles, Louisiana, with more. Kaylee, what are you seeing?
Well, Allison, knowing that Harvey made landfall less than an hour from here in Lake Charles, I would think I would be standing here in the rain talking with you this morning, but that's not the case. Wind, the bigger problem in Lake Charles this morning. Officials telling me they expect 40 to 50 mile an hour sustained winds throughout this day. That means they're anticipating power outages and tree damage, especially when the roots of the trees here are already so soaked from the rainfall we've seen this week and a very wet summer. I spoke earlier with the Director of Emergency Preparedness for Calcasieu Parish. He told me there were no calls for rescue overnight. It didn't rain as much overnight as anybody expected either. But yesterday and the night before, more than 500 rescues in Calcasieu and the neighboring Cameron Parish. And yesterday, on the 12th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, I spoke with Governor John Bell Edwards, and he told me that unfortunately people in Louisiana all too familiar with disasters. Despite the unknowns we still have today, Chris, he says he feels he has the people trained, experienced, and prepared for whatever today may bring.
All right, Kaylee, thank you very much. Keep us apprised of the situation there. So the big X factor is how much rain, how much wind, and where. And the specific concern in and around Houston are going to be those dams built in 1940. Is their age going to be determinative of their, you see, in terms of the path? And what are these infrastructure variables?
Well, the infrastructure is at its capacity because now it's actually flowing around the dam itself, and I'll get to that in a second. There's Cameron Parish right there where that center of circulation came on shore just a couple of hours ago. And there goes Harvey. Finally moving. The rain is moving away from Houston, but it's still into Beaumont, Port Arthur. And man, has it rained overnight there. A foot at least, some spots 18 inches. So I suspect we should focus a little bit on that Beaumont, Port Arthur area for the rest of the day because you're still going to see another 6 to 10. But look at these numbers here from Cedar Bayou, a new record at 51.88. You know, 4 days ago, I walked on this platform right here and I said, there's a potential for 50 inches of rain. Look what this computer model is saying. And we couldn't believe it. It was just, it was confounding. You couldn't put your mind around it. So that has to be wrong. Well, it was right. And we said if the computers are right, this is going to be a catastrophic flood. And the computers were right this time. So here we go. This is the model you talked about. This right here. These are the dams we're talking about. This right here, Addicts, the big A. This right here, Barkers right here, doing very well. They are in great shape right now. They are not breaching. I've seen all kinds of tweets about all this. They are not breaching. What's happening is that out of Addicts, water's going into the bayou, Buffalo Bayou, and to Houston. That's normal. That's what they expect. They're letting that water out on purpose. What is wrong, if that's the right word, is that the end of this right here is the end of the water, and the water is spilling around the top of the dam at 108 feet above sea level. Gets above 108, it's going to spill. It was planned to do that. Now, that's not good for the neighborhoods here, because those people there are flooding now that weren't flooding before. But we do know, certainly, that the flooding has happened all the way through these neighborhoods behind Addicts and Barker, and there are now at least 3,500 homes flooded because the water couldn't get out of those dams fast enough. Allison.
Okay, Chad, thank you very much. We'll check back in with you throughout the program. So our next guest here is very lucky to be alive. His family of 6 managed to escape their home just moments before their boiler exploded and the house burnt to the ground in front of them. Sadly, they lost all of their pets except one of them. And the one who made it out with them is their dog named Miracle. I am joined now by Jose Gonzalez and Miracle. Jose, thank you for being here. I can see how upsetting all of this is to you. I'm so sorry that you've gone.
I didn't even tell you said it like that.
I'm so sorry that you're going through all of this. We're grateful that your family made it out alive. How many pets did you lose?
14.
You had 14 pets in your house. You had new kittens, I guess. 8, 9?
8.
You had 8 new kittens. And then you had 3 other dogs besides Miracle?
Yes, ma'am. A pit bull, a deer chihuahua, and a teacup chihuahua.
Oh my gosh. And tell us what happened this weekend. Tell us what happened when you were in your home. You were trying to stay in home and shelter in place, and what happened?
We got woke up real early Saturday. My stepdad came out of his room to go check, see how it looked outside, and he saw water in our yard coming towards the house. So he woke all of us up, so we started getting everything into my room upstairs. And
all of you were gathered in one room.
yeah.
And then at some point, when you were gathered in one room, the water was getting higher and higher.
Yes, ma'am.
And at some point, not you, but some of your family members smelled gas.
Yes, ma'am.
Then what happened?
Well, I had went to the bathroom. I didn't know anything about that. I wanted to use the bathroom so I didn't have to go upstairs. And then next thing I know, I hear like a loud pop, and the door flew open, and part of the frame hit me in the back of my head. And then I was like, what happened? Then I heard all my family yelling, get out, there's a fire. And I got out of the bathroom. I started running out the front door, and then I was like, wait, where are the dogs? They said they're all still upstairs. I tried to go, but I couldn't even make it to my steps. The fire had already made it in the house.
The fire had already started at that point.
Yes, ma'am.
But you and your family members, including an 11-year-old child,
Yes, ma'am.
got out. And then you were in what, waist-deep water?
Well, right in our house and stepping outside, it was at about knee-high. But our house is raised about 5 feet. And by the time we got down, it was like up to chest like going down our driveway, it came up to waist, but once we hit the street, it came up to chest.
So then you had to swim for your life. You and your family members, 6 of you, had to swim across the street. And tell me when you turned around what you saw happening with your house.
None of us wanted to look at it, but eventually we had to. And when we did, my room had already caught fire.
So you watched your house burn.
Yes, ma'am.
And how did you have Miracle with you?
I don't know. My mom said that he just ran down the stairs as soon as he heard the pop.
And was he in your how was he swimming alongside of you? Was he in your arms?
No, my sister grabbed him, the 11-year-old. She grabbed him, my dad grabbed her.
So she had Miracle in her arms.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, why did you name your dog Miracle to begin with?
When he was born, 2 days after he was born, his mom and his 6 other siblings died. So my mom bottle fed him to raise him.
She bottle fed him like a baby.
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, I can see how close you are to Miracle. What a sweet dog. And so when you watched your house burning, what were you thinking? What was happening?
It felt like a bad dream. At first, I couldn't grasp it for a while.
And so how long, now you've been here since the weekend. And what will happen next for your family?
Well, as soon as it clears up, we have people that want to take us to Waco.
And you'll stay there while you rebuild?
Well, we're just going to go
You're going to move
back
to
over
Waco?
there. Yes, ma'am.
You're going to move to
As
Waco?
soon as this all clears up, we're going to wait about a month or two and see if it clears up. Then we're going to come down and get what we can if there's anything salvageable from the house.
Yeah.
We had a big 200-pound barbecue pit in our backyard that we made. So we're hoping that might still be there. Then all our cars, my dad's truck caught fire. He had 30 gallons of gasoline and 2 power generators in the back of his truck.
Oh my gosh.
And a piece of the house collapsed into the truck and the truck blew.
Well, Jose, we're so glad that you and your family survived and made it out just in a nick of time before the fire started. And Miracle has lived up to his name. He's really a sweet dog. Thank you so much. And we're wishing you the best and praying for you. Thank you for telling your story for us. Chris, this is obviously just one story here. As I said, there are something like 8,300 people here. We walked around this morning when we first got to the George Brown Convention Center, and it's early still, you know, it's before 6 a.m. But obviously the fluorescent lights are shining on people trying to sleep in these main corridors. There are 3 huge halls here that are about 3 times the size of football fields. And there is just cot after cot after cot donated by the Red Cross with people trying to sleep, people trying to heal. What you're looking at right here are all of the clothing donations that are coming in from other citizens trying to help their fellow neighbors, and people are sorting through them, sifting through them, trying to figure out what's usable, trying to figure out what size things are and what the need is. So all of this is happening even at this hour here in the convention center. And we are joined now, we're happy to have him, our CNN contributor, Lieutenant General Russell Honore. He, of course, is the former Joint Task Force of Katrina. He was the commander, and he coordinated the military efforts in New Orleans. General, great to have you here with us. Tell us what you've seen in these days and what we're facing here with Harvey.
Well, the good news, I've been here for about 6 hours. I haven't seen any rain.
Yes.
And the bad news is there are a lot of people that still, the search and rescue must continue over a very large area. I drove in here yesterday from Beaumont, and the entire distance from Beaumont to here, which is almost 90 miles, the entire area is flooded.
Oh my gosh. I mean, it's impossible to know how many people are still stranded in their homes.
Absolutely. And now you consider all the south of Houston and the number of people, I think there's still a major effort. You know, Allison, the first step after search and rescue is we have to go into every home and see if there was anyone left. And from our experience at Katrina, that's when we really found the bad news, because most of the people we found were elderly, disabled, and they were home alone. So that sad story is still yet to happen. Right now, we'll still be, for another 72 hours, I think, rescuing the living, people that require, because the water is still rising along the Brazos.
And, you know, I've heard officials say that if you can hear them, and if you're in your home, and if you're stranded, and if you have a white towel, to hang it out your window so that people know that somebody is in that house. But beyond that system, how do you figure out who's stranded and where people are?
Well, you know, this is the second big event. It lays something out there. We've got to create a technology. The other thing we don't have an answer to, Allison, if people left their home, the home is empty, we don't have a common marking. So in many cases, we will go in and break the door to get in the house, a house that's secure with no one in it. There are some things we got to clean up. It's been 12 years, and some of it hadn't been improved, but we're going to try to use this experience while I came here to try and capture some of that.
And yet, the people that I've spoken to who experienced Katrina and now are here, some of the workers, they say that what we're seeing right now this morning in the convention center is much different, much better organized. You see a heavy security presence.
Oh, yeah.
What do you see when you walk around among these 8,300 people who are sheltering here?
You see organization, and which is different than the what they call a shelter of last response at the Superdome, and the government didn't know for 24 hours we had people at the convention center. So it's a totally different operation. It shows improvements, but we still got to work some on that evacuation piece for a major city like this. Because
one of the confusing things, General, is that it's just hard to get your mind around that there are 8,300 people here who are sleeping in all of these crowded cot conditions, but there are millions of people in Houston, and Houston was underwater, so where's everybody else?
They're out there in the survival mode, and we've got to be prepared to go get them. And this is going to get worse before it gets better. We have not seen the worst of this yet. My estimate, from my experience here in America and around the world, the worst is yet to come in terms of the outcome, which means people stuck in their home and we can't get them out. And they're isolated.
Yeah. Well, no one knows better than you, General. So thank you. You'll be with us all morning, helping us get through all of this, and we want to rely on your expertise. Thank you for being with us. So let's get back to Chris in New York now. Chris.
And you were standing next to the right man, boy. I tell you, it would be unimaginable to be less prepared than they were during Katrina, but this situation is going the right way in terms of what they can do in terms of the capacity they're getting, but what do you do as the capacity increases? That's what you're going to see down there, Allison, is how they deal with the need. President Trump went down there to express his concern and his promise that the federal government will be there to reassure the first responders and those who are struggling. How did he handle it? Did he give the right message? Did he show the empathy required of the consoler-in-chief? We're going to discuss the take, the criticism, and the fairness of it next.
Aaron Burnett out front. Stories that matter.
You've got the money and you've got the passion, but how do you...
It's a basic political reality that in moments like this, you need leadership so much. And the president did go down to Texas, and he promised disaster response unlike any other we've ever seen. The president's trip did not include stops to the hardest hit areas, but that was for a reason. They didn't want to tax the first responders. They didn't want to get in the way of the rescue efforts. The president is getting criticism not for that, but for what he said, what he didn't say, and how. CNN's Joe Johns is live at the White House with more. There's always going to be some criticism, but it's been more intense than expected this time.
I think that's right, Chris. The natural disaster on the Gulf Coast giving the president a prime opportunity to get on the ground and engage with the people who are suffering and struggling on the Gulf Coast. Now, the president's visit to Texas was certainly well received by the people there, especially the state and local officials who realize that help from Washington is going to be required in the next days, months, weeks, and even years ahead. But the president was hit by his critics for what could be perceived as a lack of expression of empathy for the victims. The president choosing instead to focus on the resilience of Texas and offering words of encouragement.
This was of epic proportion. Nobody's ever seen anything like this. Governor, again, thank you very much. And we won't say congratulations. We don't want to do that. We don't want to congratulate. We'll congratulate each other when it's all finished.
Today, the president is expected to go back on the road again, this time to Springfield, Missouri, to offer the opening salvo, if you will, on his tax reform plan. No indication that the White House is planning on changing that trip due to the situation on the Gulf Coast. The president is expected to return to the disaster area over the weekend, Chris.
Right, and we're hearing from our reporters that the vice president may be there before that, so we'll watch. This is certainly a show of force by the administration in this situation. Joe, thank you very much. Let's bring in our panel. We have CNN political analyst Abby Phillip and CNN political commentator Errol Lewis. All right, so Errol, look, there's criticism in all things. Let's get to the merits of what was expected and what fell short in your estimation.
Well, what was expected? It was expected that he'd be, I think in some quarters, that he'd be some kind of a comforter and show a side of this president that we've really not seen in public life. That was probably a little bit unrealistic. This is somebody who likes to show that he can take charge, that he can come in and organize things, that he can come in and make things better. He's not somebody who's going to hold a weeping mother in his arms or anything like that, and he didn't go anywhere near that. He didn't roll up his sleeves and get in the mud even for the sake of showmanship. It's not his style. It's not what he wanted to do. This ended up being, in some ways, like kind of an ink blot test. You know, there's no way any president is going to ever get it exactly right. If you stay away, you look like you're aloof. If you go into it, it looks like a photo op and it's staged and you're kind of wasting everybody's time. So he walked the path that he walked. In my estimation, I think he got it about as good as could be expected. The real questions, of course, are going to now follow about the recovery, the rebuilding. And when he said to the governor, we'll congratulate ourselves when it's all over, it's not going to get done this year. It's not going to get done during this presidency. They have a very, very long road ahead of them down there.
Well, there's no question. I mean, Abby, look at what we saw in Louisiana. You had 450,000 plus before, assuming that they had their count right, and that's a whole other story about the communities that may have not been accounted for properly. They have about 400,000 now, so recovery becomes a defined term. But what do you see as the measure of the man in this moment?
Yeah, I mean, I think Errol is right to some extent that they knew that there would be risks in doing this. When you go down early, you kind of have to go outside of the immediate disaster area. You don't get close enough to victims that you can actually have those moments. I think Trump probably did miss an opportunity to say something, you know, a message from his mouth to the American people, to the people who are still in the line of fire here about, you know, about the fact that the rest of the country is with them, about what they've been suffering, about their loss and their experiences. That being said, to the White House's credit, they're aware of the reality that the situation did not lend itself to that. That's why they've floated the idea and are likely to go back over the weekend when things have maybe settled a little bit or just enough that he can actually be face to face with people who are at risk here. So I think they're aware. I think you know, this is a first for President Trump. He's going to have to learn how to do this. We won't know how he fares until he's faced with that situation. And they probably learned from the feedback and maybe some of the backlash from the experience that he actually needs to do more. It's not going to be enough to say, hey, you know, everything's going really well and congratulate the officials on the ground. No one really cares about that. What they care about is the idea that everybody understands what they've gone through and what they've lost.
There happens to be one piece of sound in particular that wound up piquing the interest of critics. Do we have it in terms of what he had said in his moment? Yes.
Thank you, everybody. What a crowd, what a turnout. I will tell you, this is historic. It's epic what happened. But you know what? It happened in Texas, and Texas can handle anything. Thank you all, folks. Thank you.
Look, the truth is, Errol, this is who he is. If he's going to go somewhere, he's going to talk about the crowd side. He's going to talk about the projection of his own popularity. You know, that's who he was when he got elected. That's who he is now. It's not going to change. You like it, you don't like it, period. You're going to have to measure the actions. Will he get Congress to give the money, or we're going to see what we saw with Sandy? And the political cover-up of what happened with Sandy can't be allowed, because if we don't call out what happened, then some lawmakers somewhere are going to try to repeat it. So that's going to be the test. Now, today, he's going to Missouri. He's going to try to sell his tax plan. Is that the right move in this moment?
It probably is, to tell you the truth, because different things that are going on, right? There's missiles flying over Japan. There's a political agenda that doesn't come to a halt. The nation and the life of the nation goes forward. So, yes, it is the right thing. However, this is a case, I think, where what he says and how he says it will really, really matter. Because whatever else he says, he needs to express sympathy for people who are going through the trauma of a lifetime in Texas right next door. He's also, though, I think, got to sort of be careful not to be too political about it. And this is the political edge of selling the tax plan. This is trying to sort of stir people up and make them feel like something is necessary. This is the time to sort of put pressure. That's why he's going to Missouri, to put pressure on their Democratic senator there. If it's too political, it'll start to feel a little bit jarring.
More proof of why it is the most difficult job in the world. Errol, Abby, thank you very much. Let's get back to Allison down in Houston, and that's the main test. Will people stay interested, stay involved? You're in the right place at the right time.
Because, Chris, as you know, it's raining again in parts of Houston. Southeastern Texas is being hammered by rain as Harvey makes landfall now a second time. So we have a live report from the ground next. Also, to learn more about how you can help those affected by Harvey, go to CNN.com/impact. They need your help.
Okay, record $500, 5 cents, whatever you can donate. However, you can spread the word. YouCaring.com/JJWatt.
Now, Watt and the Texans will be on the field for their final preseason game tomorrow night. The game was moved from Houston to Arlington. Every ticket to the game, $25, with all proceeds going to those affected by Hurricane Harvey. Now, the Astros, meanwhile, moving their series with the Rangers this week to Tampa. Houston fans coming to the game with signs showing their support for their city. All tickets, concessions, and parking revenues from the series going to the relief efforts. The Astros would lose this game 12-2. And, guys, I want to send a props out to Houston Rockets owner Les Alexander. He has upped his donation to Harvey relief efforts from $4 million to $10 million.
I know that makes a former Houston Rockets ball boy very proud this morning. Great to see what the Rockets and the sports world is doing. Thank you so much, Andy Scholes.
All right.
Thanks, Andy. And North Korea's latest missile launch could spell more sanctions. But what industries are left to target? CNN Money Stream is next. An ultimatum from the UN Security Council. Member nations say they are furious over North Korea's latest missile launch, condemning it as outrageous. And in a clear sign of how seriously the U.S. takes this threat, the U.S. conducted a missile defense test early this morning, successfully intercepting a medium-range ballistic missile off the coast of Hawaii. We have CNN's Will Ripley live for us on the phone from Pyongyang, the only Western journalist in North Korea. Will, tell us, what is the update at this point now? Do the people in North Korea know what happened?
Hi, Renee. They do know what happened. I've just returned from the central train station in Pyongyang, where on a giant screen, the 5 o'clock news bulletin came on, and that famous North Korean news anchor, Ri Chon-hee, announced that their country successfully launched the Hwasong-12 intermediate-range missile and flew it over Japan. The news received cheers from the crowd. I estimated a couple hundred people probably watching, including young women who are part of a Future Soldiers group. I asked one of them if she thought that her future might be harder because her country is doing things like this, and the answer she gave me is that North Korea won't have any problems as long as they have their supreme leader, Kim Jong-un, which, of course, is the response you would expect in an authoritarian country where political dissent is not tolerated. Everyone in the crowd that we talked to said the same thing. Keep in mind, they didn't know about the launch for more than 24 hours because the country waited to make an official announcement. And in North Korea, with no access to the internet or outside media, all they know is what their government tells them. Renee?
Right, and Will, I mean, you know, we've heard what the president says. We now know what they did as far as launching it over Japan. What's your take on the fact that they didn't go near Guam this time? What should we read from that?
Well, there was a news bulletin put out by North Korean state media this morning saying that this launch was simply a prelude to future military action aimed at containing Guam, and they also promised more missile launches targeting the Pacific in the future. So North Korea would say that this was a test run, not necessarily them backing down, as the Japanese foreign minister implied. Obviously, by flying the missile over Japan, they avoided a highly provocative act. But